between software development lifecycle and software test lifecycle?
Software development lifecycle, it is related to the software development, and SDLC is mainly related to the software. Where in SDLC, we require more number of developers for the whole process. In SDLC, we require less number of testers to test the application. In SDLC, development team is involved in planning and design, whereas in SDLC, testing team involves in the design and planning. Whereas SDLC helps in developing a good quality product, where SDLC it gives the application defect free, and yes, so SDLC phases are started before the SDLC phases, whereas SDLC phases are performed after the SDLC phases.
Right. Yeah. So few things to correct here. So SDLC doesn't, like you mentioned, SDLC provides you the defect free. So there is nothing defect free as such. So there is no product which is defect free. Somewhere or some environment, somewhere it might fail, right? So you can't say that it is a defect free. Don't use defect free term there. But other aspects of it are correct. The other thing that you need to make note of is that SDLC is sort of a subset of software development lifecycle, right? So software development lifecycle is the overall lifecycle of a software development. Now, when you do the development, it requires different phases like requirements, design, then development, then test. So the SDLC lifecycle goes hand in hand. When we talk about V model, it goes hand in hand with the development activities. But when we talk about the waterfall approach, it was a subset of the overall development life cycle, right? So SDLC is kind of, you can say, a subset of the overall development life cycle, but that doesn't mean that it is just refined to a particular area, right? SDLC nowadays in Agile is very collaborative. So testing team is very collaborative, and they work hand in hand with whole team right from the requirement till the release phase. So just most of the point you have covered are correct. Do not mention about the defect free. And this is, when somebody will ask, they will ask you in relation to the waterfall approach. So you have covered mostly the details about the waterfall approach anyways, and Agile and all that. When you get into the project, you will anyways know how things are similar, how they differ in the actual, projects. Okay. But a couple of things to make a note there. All right. Very good. Can you explain a testing principle, early testing, and what exactly it refers when we say early testing?
Early testing is a type of a software testing where the software testing has to be conducted at the early stages itself. Where in the software development life cycle, in order to eliminate the defect at the early stages. And early testing, it helps to where the number of defects can be reduced in the future. And also it results in developing the successful product or high quality. It results in high quality product.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned about it is a type of testing. Is it a type of testing or it's a principle?
Principle, sir.
It's a principle. Yeah. So I thought it's just, like you missed that part. Okay. But yeah, it's a principle, right? So it's not a type of testing, it's principle, and rest everything that you have covered. The why it needs to be done. It needs to be done to deliver a high quality product, because when you start early in the life cycle, right? So like you would have read about the waterfall model. So waterfall model, the disadvantage was you had the requirements. Only when the requirement phase was completed, then they used to move to the next phase. Until then, all the team was just waiting on the requirements, right? Then design, when design was completed, then it moved to the development phase. When development completed, it moved to test phase. So testing was like 4th or 5th in the cycle. So people or the testing team was not involved early, and that's where testing principle, early testing came, right? To overcome all those disadvantages of waterfall approach. So starting early testing, and that's where static testing, if you remember the first question, that's where static testing starts. It's not the dynamic testing. Dynamic testing starts after the build is ready. So testing, early testing is when the testing or the testers get involved during the requirement phase or the early phase itself, so that they can review the document, they can identify the gap, they can provide the feedback and help in the better quality product, right? So even many defects are found during the review phase, during the walkthrough phase. Okay, so that's what the principle of early testing is. Your answer is absolutely correct. um, just like keep reading. I mean, don't stop, just keep reading, read as much as you can about all these questions. All right, what do you understand by cookie testing?
Cookie testing, it is also a software testing where it checks whether the cookie is created in the web browser, where a cookie is nothing but the user's identity, and it is used to track the user navigation through the pages of the website. So it checks whether the cookies are created in the web browser.
Right. Okay. So it's basically not the web browser. It's basically so these cookies are just the text files which are created and stored in your hard drive. Can you give me some of the examples? Like there are many examples. Whenever you open a particular website, cookies are everywhere, like on the internet. Can you give some example that you have noticed nowadays? Any website that you open, it pops up something. Do you remember?
Yes, yeah. On pop-up message will come, so
That
yeah,
accept
I have
cookies, right?
observed that.
Yeah.
But yes, so but don't know the exact of cookie testing and all. I have
Right.
observed when browser opens,
Yeah.
notification or pop-up will come.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now, so usually what is the use of it? Okay. Have you noticed that if you are searching for clothes, right? So say you are searching for your clothes online. Have you noticed that you close the browser, 2 days later you open again, it will
Yes,
start showing you
the
the
same.
advertisements of different,
Yes,
clothes,
the related.
right?
Yes,
So that's the whole point of cookies.
related to the search history, it will come.
Exactly, right. So cookies are so it's basically a small file, that information that you can say it's a text file that gets stored on your computer, and it tracks how you have navigated, what you have searched. So it keeps all that information, and next time when you open, so it refers to that cookie and shows you the relevant advertisements or products. That's one part of it. Second, you would have noticed, if you go any shopping websites, right? So for example, Amazon or Flipkart or whatever, you add the items into the cart, leave it. Okay, close, log off, whatever you do. You again log in 2-3 days later. Okay, you will see that the item that you have added in the cart is still exists there.
Yes, sir.
That is managed
I
through
have
the cookies,
noticed.
right? So these are some of the examples.
Yes.
Unless and until you go and delete the cookies, you would have in the browser, you can go into the settings and you can delete all the cookies or clear cookies. Once you clear all the cookies, all the cookie information, history information is deleted. Then it won't display all those things. But as far as the cookie information is there, and there is some life cycle of the cookie. So cookies are stored for 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, depending on, say for example, it's a shopping website or it's a advertisement. So depending on the policies, you have to, when you say, when these pop-ups come, you have to read those pop-ups. They'll say, we track your information to show you the better results, right? So that's what all
Yes, sir.
is do. And there are many, it's a big sort of testing. But overall, to give you example, this is what it is in the real scenario. That's what cookie is. And when you go ahead and test it, so there will be, like session cookies, persistent cookies. So go ahead, read it. There is a lot of detail available on the internet. It is very, very interesting. So when you go ahead and do the cookie testing, you have to basically do a lot of manipulation in the cookies and see how the behavior is, especially if you're going for in a e-commerce sort of project, you will do that a lot. Okay. So some of the
Yes, sir.
examples, try to include it. Okay. Do you understand by performance testing?
As performance testing, it is a type of non-functional testing where we test the stability and response to an application by applying the load, where load refers to the number of users accessing the application or n number of users or trying to access the application at the same time. So it checks the stability and response time of an application.
Right. Yeah. Great. Any sort of, example that you can provide when you say
Yes, so
speed and yeah, go ahead.
for example, if you take the Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
so it is by the n number of users accessing the Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
whether if there are n number of users accessing the application, whether it is working fine or whether it is responding to the user properly. So if it takes the long time of clicking the one page or redirect to the another page, it takes longer time. No one will use that application. It takes long time. So it checks whether it is responding correctly or working fine if n number of loads
Mm-hmm.
or n number of excess of loads are added at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely correct. So, like you mentioned the response time, right? So acceptable response time. So Amazon example, you took any of the e-commerce website. If a
Yes.
person tries to access it, and at one particular point of time, there are thousands and thousands of people accessing at the same time, right? But
So,
response time is good for each and every user. So when we test these sort of non-functional requirements, so these are known as non-functional requirement, which you already covered. When you test the response time, when there is a huge amount of load on the application, that is what performance is all about. You test the speed, you test the scalability, stability, whether the application is stable, it doesn't crashes when there are, say for example, there is a sale, right? If you would have remember, there was a Flipkart, some big billion sale, right?
so
And as
yes.
soon as they opened, I think on the same day, the website crashed or the orders were not able to process. So those sort of things shouldn't happen, right? So all those sort of
Yes.
testing is part of the performance testing. So absolutely correct answer. On the similar note, what do you understand by the scalability testing?
Okay. Scalability testing. It is a type of performance testing
Mm-hmm.
uh, where scalability is it measures the performance of a system
Mm-hmm.
when a large number of users
Mm-hmm.
and yes, it tests under the excess load
Mm-hmm.
and it tests the application when the number of users scale and it checks the checks the performance of the application.
Right. So it's basically a part of the performance testing, and it's a type of
Yes,
performance testing. So in performance testing, there are many types. So you
yes, sir.
have load, scalability, and when we talk about
Load,
scalability,
stress.
it basically, test when you whether you can scale up or scale down. When you scale up or scale down, what happens to the resources, and resource could be your network resources, your CPU, your application. So any sort of resources that are being used, what happens to those resources when you scale up to, say for example, 10,000 users, right? Whether they are able
Yes.
to handle the scaled up number of users, right? Or increased workload. So that sort of testing comes into the scalability. And now performance testing is totally, it's a very vast topic and very vast field. So
Yes, sir.
as part of the manual testing, for at your level, I would just recommend go through, learn all the performance, what exactly performance testing is, which you have already covered, you know about it, read more about it.
Yes.
Second thing is read the types of performance testing, right? So load,
Yes,
stress,
sir.
scalability, volume, read the types and try to understand the differences between these types. That should be enough at your
Yes.
level for a fresher to crack any sort of software testing interview. All right. It's a totally different
Yes.
field. So if you go into software testing, performance testing field is completely different, right? So it's a
Okay.
manual, like automation testing is different, performance testing is a different field. So in terms of basic interview, just cover the topics that I have mentioned.